To Oxford, Junot Diaz.
Oh, thanks, Ron. Good to see you again, man.
Good to see you too. Congratulations on winning the Sunday Times EFG Private Bank Short Story Award 2013. Have you won a prize which is a bigger mouthful than that one?
No, I don't think so. But damn, any winning, you're like, I'll be happy to say your very long name.
Yeah. So tell us about Miss Lora. It's about Junior, who is obviously, people familiar with your work will know that perpetually down on his luck Junior. Where do we find him in Miss Lora?
Story, we find him in late adolescence, about 16 years old, in high school. His family life is kind of in shambles. His brother has just died. He has this terrifying sociopathic brother who he's in many ways very loyal to, and his brother just dies of leukemia. So he's kind of reeling from this loss, and he's having these apocalyptic fantasies, these apocalyptic sort of night terrors. He keeps dreaming about the end of the world because the story is set in the 80s, that kind of the height of the nuclear terror. And when this is all going on, he ends up getting involved in a relationship with an older high school teacher, Miss Lora, which, of course, as is a tendency in short fiction, doesn't end well.
And it meant the book mentions the film Red Dawn, the classic Red Dawn. What do you think Junior would make of the newly released, newly rebooted Red Dawn?
Oh, you're going that. Well, of course I had to check it out because, I kind of was a Red Dawn kid, and it just shows you, man, every generation gets the Red Dawn they deserve. Man, was that nonsense.
Who are the bad guys in the 2013?
They were supposed to be Chinese, and then the studio suddenly realized that, my God, we're never going to be allowed to show a film in China. And so they actually went back and digitally scrubbed every emblem of the Red Chinese Army, of the People's Army. And so they put in North Korea digitally. And it goes to show.
That's awful.
Yeah, but it's also just, again, this is kind of one of those U.S. militaristic fantasies, the kind of stuff that kind of American audiences kind of are semi-addicted to. And the original movie was so tough. Like, the original movie was so grim. If you watch that movie, the final words of one of the female characters as she's lying on the ground is, "Give me a grenade." I'm like, wow. And in this movie, of course, everyone's like about as tough.
How does my hair look?
Yeah. They're about as tough as my, I guess my little 4-year-old nephew.
Well, back to Miss Lora and back to the collection. This Is How You Lose Her. How did you pick Miss Lora as the one that you were going to submit for the prize?
I didn't submit it. I'm sure my publisher submitted it, to be honest.
Okay. What do you think their rationale was with picking that one?
Because
I would have gone with The Cheetah's Guide to Love. I love that story.
Yeah, they probably thought the other ones all sucked, so they just went in with this one. They're like, oh, this is the one I like, I don't know. It's sort of a tough little story. For some people, I think it depends on where you're coming at, what angle you're coming at it. It's kind of a difficult story to wrap your mind in because it sort of catches you and makes you very, very complicit in some of the darker logics, the kind of the darker, we would say, the political unconscious of the story. It just pulls you in. So maybe they went for that reason.
But also, the greatest thing about Miss Lora is the things that don't happen in the actual narration of the story, the things that you wonder about, the thing that is driving Paloma, the thing that has made Miss Lora who she is, a bit more of Miss Lora's relationship with the brother and the mum and what she thinks is going on with Junior. And there's so much happens in that story that is unsaid, and I think that is the beauty of that story.
Very kind.
Was that something that was intentional when you were writing it?
Yeah, I think most of the time, most of the fiction I write tends to have everything that's important like completely off the page. I tend to organize my work around something that's being not said, or something that has occurred, or some calamity in the past or in the distance, or some absent person. And this story, of course, this is a wild story because it has this kind of nuclear menace hanging over all the characters, but in some ways, at least to Yunior, that would be a relief given the crazy stuff that's going on in his life, you know, or that has happened.
In a way, you seem to upend most high school students' ultimate fantasies, which is to sleep with an older woman and have this sort of
Boy, high school students of a straight nature, yeah. And I just think that our fantasies, careful what you wish for, because you know, someone like Yunior, you can see that the consequences last way long and scramble his sense of intimacy the way these things tend to.
But what you end up doing is trying to fit that event, those events with Miss Lora into the whole canon of Junior, and whether that's the thing that sends him off down these various paths that you see him on in other stories, in both maybe Drown and in This Is How You Lose Her. And so did you always have this story in mind as something you were going to write?
Oh yeah, I mean this story is like, it's been over 10 years in the making. I have so many versions of the story that just crapped out. It's one of those stories like The Cheater's Guide to Love was a story that I think I've been working on for about 16 years. But Miss Lora is about 11 years. I've got about 20 to 30 versions of it, and this was the one that finally came together. In my mind, you know, the sources and the kind of ruptures that make Junior's difficulty with intimacy possible tend to proceed along a couple of lines. And one of these lines was a kind of an early, really kind of unethical, illegal relationship. And I always wanted to write it, but never got a chance to.
And when you're working on, you say you were working on this for 11 years. When you're working on a story, is that the only story you're working on, or do you have lots of different things on the go?
I rarely don't have many things on the go. I would say it's probably one or two things the most. So it was probably maximum 3. So those 2 stories were the constant source of, they were just a lament. They were a lament. Those 2 stories I couldn't crack for the life of me. And those 2 stories followed me through the entire writing of Oscar Wilde. Yeah.
And just finally, what makes the perfect short story?
It's a wonderful question. I think, of course, all the stories out there that people think are perfect provide their own sort of best explanation for themselves and for their existence and for the strategies to write them. I think that, you know, what makes a short story so wondrous and so impossible is that the short story in its form has an enormous amount of power, because when we finish a story, we are, you know, irrevocably and palpably reminded about how things end, about periodicity, about how most of life is ephemera, how entire chapters and people and places and moments and sensations and dreams can just vanish. And you know, a novel is a bit of a kind of a false consolation, because you start a novel and you know that thing's not going to end to page 365. Till that last page is turned, you know that novel's not going to end. And there's nothing about life that's like that. And I think a short story hews closer to how life really shocks us with its endings, how life constantly forces us to admit that chapters close. And I think short stories in some ways, at least the best short stories, remind us constantly of that, of the closure that life keeps dealing us.
Brilliant, thank you.